Conscious manifestation versus a real manifestation. Did I just create something in my head, or was that actually real, what I just saw? Biologically, you'll never know the difference. We could all be sitting here right now, but we're actually, this is a long time ago. We're not even here right now. This isn't even the real moment. How do I know it's real? Well, I see it, and I feel it, and I smell it, and I touch it. I go, yeah, go to sleep. And in your dream state, your biology will be activated by your brain, your central nervous system will and to your sleep state, can you tell if it was a real state or did I just create something in my head? Or was that, then how do you know if the real state you're in right now is the real state or the dream state? We could all be sitting here right now, but we're not even here right now. The conundrum isn't even the real moment. How do I know it's the real moment? Well, we're having to pick this probable moment and be in this probable moment
How are you doing? I'm all right.
Sure.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel a little funny, that's all. Nothing unusual. How about yourself? Coffee? Yeah, I'll take some.
Sure.
Gotta have to reheat it. You couldn't make some fresh, could you? Yeah, I suppose. I'll have this stuff. Make you a fresh pie. Thank you. You're welcome. So how's the project coming along? Pretty good. How's the project coming along?
It's right over there.
Pretty good. Here's your coffee. Thank you. How's the project coming along?
It's right over there.
Pretty good.
No, it's over there.
Here's your coffee. Thank you.
Over there.
How's the project coming along?
Right over there.
Pretty good.
No, dummy, it's right here. No, it's over there.
Here's your coffee. Thank you.
It's right here.
Transcend doesn't mean it becomes completely abolished, but you discover in yourself a deeper dimension. It's only by discovering that depth in you that you can become free of being a slave to conditioned thinking. that dimension that is in everyone. One could call it a dimension of consciousness that has been pointed to by ancient teachers for thousands of years. The possibility that there is another dimension in you, not something that you need to bring about, but something that you can discover because it's already there. It's just being overlooked. Very much like the fish maybe tempted to overlook the presence of water and spend his whole life looking for it. One says, I've been told that it's an incredible thing that pervades everything and surrounds us as a I've been looking for it all my life. And it's very much the same with what is sometimes called the spiritual dimension of life. It's already here in you, and yet most people haven't found it. Getting away from the mind is to transcend the thinking mind. Transcend doesn't mean it becomes completely abolished, but you discover in yourself a deeper dimension. It's only by discovering that depth in you that you can become free of being the slave to conditioned thinking, the voice in the head that never stops. So we are here to find or deepen that dimension that is in everyone. One could call it a dimension of consciousness. that has been pointed to by ancient teachers for thousands of years, the possibility that there is another dimension in you, not something that you need to bring about, but something you just need to discover because it's already there. It's just being overlooked continuously, very much like the fish may be tempted to overlook the presence of water and spend his whole life looking for it. And says, I've been told there is this incredible thing that pervades everything and surrounds us and is within us, and I've been looking for it all my life. And it's very much the same with what is sometimes called the spiritual dimension of life. It's already here within you, and yet most people haven't found it.
What do you need a telephone? You're listening to ThoughtBridgeRadio.com, broadcasting over the worldwide radio network.com. You're listening
You have to either go through some kind of death experience, have it revealed, absolutely. No, it's not ready. What we've got here is
And because I was determined to find out what that meant, I was fucking yeah, what do people say about me? Why would you deny yourself? Right? You know, sex is so much fun. Why do monks go celibate? It's got to be a good reason. It's got to be something better than lust or sex or orgasm. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. But if you don't have so I'm an experimenter. I don't know how things work, right? I was 30 years old before it occurred to me to try it. You know, at 15, it was thinking about, you know, maybe jerking off. I don't know. It did pretty good. Get tired of that after a while. You say, well, that's not really satisfying. That song comes out that says, I can't get no satisfaction. And you go, why is that? I was 30 years old before it occurred to me. Right? I was 30 years old before but it isn't something necessarily, you know, I was 15, it was about what it is it seems in me, is a desire, not for the idea, it's not really satisfying. But you get no satisfaction. That's not really satisfying. It's not anything that I can put you get no satisfaction. The ego part of the mind is always trying to imagine what it would be like if it was somewhere different. Right? And that's who it is. The mind that wants something different, that keeps us. But it is something I like how they say it's not really satisfying. And joy is really satisfying. So how do you enjoy something? There you go. Shut up. Before I even do. What is the ego? Your imagination. But it certainly does feel real. That's very, very powerful because the ego loves to say, and joy. How do you enjoy and joy of the ego? Shut up. How do you enjoy? Shut up. What is the ego? See how with this is from this morning, this afternoon, and whatever. All they know is it's not in the future. But is it to someone their future? Someone that's not listening now, but is 10 years behind, that stumbles upon this. It doesn't matter what they stumble upon. If it's going to be something that's going to be revealed in the future, where is the future? Long gone. See how it's a me, a them, a new generation. No generation. All these words in a matrix behind. Rectum behind. Doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what they stumble upon. It's just explanation, feeding the intellectual mind, keeping it alive. You don't use it. I've got a lot to say. Some were absolutely fun. I'm not so sure I like some of the planet, but I've been enjoying the summer for a long time. The winters aren't good. Maybe this year, eating the maybe this year I'll just play. We just got through earlier saying there's no United States, but at least in the Matrix, even though ultimately all of that stuff is bullshit, and I think what's real is what I say. You have to talk to enough people that it's still human about going to Hawaii. There's one more that's in the Matrix, apparently. I might just take it. If you do the same thing over and over and over, expecting a different result, they said, sign of what? Yeah, thank you. Well, I think you're totally fucking insane, Mr. Bridges. Looney Tunes. Well, you're welcome to your opinion. It doesn't affect me at all. Unless it does. When I'm in the Matrix. Nice thing about it is I figured out before I got screwed that I don't want fame at all. I don't want anything to know. I always want to come. But I've also liked to be on stage. It's kind of frightened me the times that I've done it. But it was a rush. It was like, will these people tear me to pieces or what? I would feel like to be crucified. But I've also liked to be on stage. Right in the what? So that's why I have all this stuff. And for me, I'm not one of those guys that want to sit and talk about the weather unless it's directly related somehow to this morphic field that seems to have been created around me. And the stuff that you will see, and I can show it to you, pretty much I've learned a lesson because these thoughts that I'm expressing, I don't know how to express them in a way that could be even understood. So I'm still limited by the one of those and the stuff that you will see, and I can show it to you. I've learned and the stuff that you will see, and I can show it to you. Pretty much, I've learned so that's why what it is. Video game, but you don't even need anybody else around you to play with you. Look at my PhD now.
David Bohm called the quantum potential. Literally. It's the enfolded information that then pops into manifestation when you give it something to do. I read something very interesting. I think Paramahansa Yogananda said it, but it's also in a new book by J. Alfred called Brains and Realities, or I think it was published in 2006. Very interesting book, Brains and Realities. Talks about the idea that the void is full, the vacuum, and the universe is empty. In other words, the void is the real deal, and everything here is complete illusion. Now, how could that be? Well, it's pretty simple. If we're 99% nothing, right, and maybe that 1% is just what we think we are, that would make us 100% nothing with nothing doing, right? One of the easiest ways, again, to make a measurement is to decide an outcome and then do nothing, and then notice what changes.
Now, how do you do nothing and have something change? Well, if the void is where everything pops from, and the void is described by us in our left brain reality as nothing, if we flip to right brain reality, what do we have? We have the inverse of nothing, which is the all. Confusing? Very useful confusing, isn't it? If your brain is confused, it means you're learning. Seriously. If something I say or something you encounter or something you read confuses you, it means you're learning. If you're not confused, you're assuming. I'm confused by everything. The carpet confuses me on a daily basis. I'm serious because I'm willing to walk so that each step takes me potentially into a different reality or a new experience or a new awareness. That would be a walking meditation, kind of like walking pneumonia with side benefits of inspiration and inhalation and illumination. Carpet as Buddhic meditation. Now, some of these carpets, particularly like in San Francisco, I believe that they were probably on LSD when they, made them. San Francisco, the Grateful Dead probably hired out people to lay down carpet where they were performing, and then people would see it and say, I want some of that, and then pretty soon San Francisco's got all this weird carpet. Mark and I wound up with our heads inside of the carpet in the first seminar we taught in San Francisco because, well, A, we're weird, and the carpet was weird, and we had a resonance phenomenon going there, and we wound up with our heads inside the carpet.
You know what time it is?
I went to, just to say, don't do this at home. This is another one of those things, this is a morphing field of stupid, please do not duplicate it. When I was much younger, I experimented a little bit with altered states with chemical phenomenon, LSD, things like that. I went to The Exorcist on LSD. Just wanted to see, if I could hold it together. It was actually kind of interesting because on LSD, it's switching to multiple awarenesses, so you could actually kind of see how a movie was pieced together. It was actually less, which was kind of cool and useful because that would have been a really bad idea, and it is a really bad idea. Please don't do that. Drugs in general are a really bad idea. Why? What I'm talking about allows you to generate your own drugs. Why do you think people want drugs in the first place? They're looking for a way out. They're looking for a change, a doorway into a different perception. Well, this does that without any chemical substances because your brain is capable of producing what looks like LSD. See, the thing is with LSD, Albert Hoffman discovered it. The thing with LSD is it was never what caused the hallucinations. The hallucinations were caused by how your brain chemistry reacted to the initiating substance. Well, the initiating substance can be a thought or a measurement. Now, a thought in itself can become a measurement. Literally, what did Einstein do? He imagined riding on a wave of light and looked over at another one, and looked at the I think it was the gravity of the Earth and noticed whether or not the light bent. You see? That's a measurement. And he did it as a thought experiment. So it's obviously true that in order to do something like what we call the two-point process in matrix energetics, you do not have to touch a body. Why would it make sense to touch a body if bodies don't exist? It makes no sense whatsoever. However, we are so wed to that body of information and set of beliefs that we believe in order to change something in our physiology or our structure or our chemistry or our emotions, we need to do something to it in response. Well, that's a Newtonian measurement. And it goes right back to that Newtonian delusion. And Newton was a wonderful scientist, and he was also an alchemist. By the way, he was attempting to prove spiritual principles through physics and through mathematics. because he believed in the Creator, he believed in God, he believed in a magical universe, he believed in the will of the Creator moving through the creation and being a part of that. He believed all these things, and he believed that the math and the physics actually would allow him to show people that. Well, all of that just got shunted away when we went into so-called rational science, which was actually an irrational fear reaction to the church. This is true. You see, when you start threatening people like Galileo with, incarceration, torture, and burning at the stake, science gets affected. Science says, screw you, first, we're not going to believe in a God that's going to torture us. We think that's ridiculous. And so, we're going to split off from God, and we're going to split off from church, because you guys have got it locked up there. And besides, if we say that we are in the realm that you claim to hold the keys to the kingdom to, then you're just going to torture us. And that sounds like a really bad idea. So what we're going to do is what Galileo did. He tried. He said there are primary and secondary qualities of matter. He said the primary qualities are the things you can measure, like distance, and weight, and density, and volume. Okay? The secondary qualities were things like emotion, like love, and color, the subjective experience of color, right? These qualities would be called subjective, and these qualities, the so-called material objective quality, those are objects, so they're objective. So we can comment upon what we can see, feel, touch, smell, and measure. So, here's where the 2-point is really great, because the act of making a measurement gets you in the morphic field of science. See? And the left brain goes, ooh, it's science, we're happy. And the right brain goes, That's from Jurassic Park, right? You didn't say the magic word. The magic word is access. When your left brain's doing something, your right brain is free to do whatever else. So you want to perform a soft measurement, and that allows your right brain to move into states of multidimensional awareness. And that makes good drugs in your head. And when you make good drugs in your head, it changes, actually even can change the cortical structure of your anatomy of your brain. Did you know this? The same book, Brains and Realities by Jay Alfred, talks about a study that Newberg and D'Aquili, I believe, their neuroscientists made, where they looked at the cortical thickness of longtime meditators and saw that in certain areas of the brain they were thicker. Cool. Here's the thing. If you believe that's the only way to make your brain thicker, well, there's a lot of ways to make your brain thicker. Some of them useful, some of them not. Marijuana can make your cortical layers thicker. Trouble is, it makes it denser where you actually can't use the layers. They become useless. That's true. It deposits a tarry substance over the cortex of the brain. So that's not necessarily a useful concept either, is it? But cortical thickness, that's not a useful concept either. Remember what I talked about Einstein and how they tried to figure out why Einstein was so smart? Thought it must be because his brain was larger than everybody else's, and it had more folds and undulations. Smaller. So there have been people who have had something called hydroencephaly. Heard of that? It means their brain is filled up with water. And so this water pushes like a bag on the cortical layers, and it over time thins it. Cortex over this big brain, and we can't measure it. Oh, that's right, we can't measure things that we can't see, feel, because of Galileo and because of that whole torture me thing. It must be somewhere that we can't measure. Now, just because we can't consciously measure something, does that mean it can't be measured? No, it means using the rules that we've applied to the act of measuring objectively do not apply in the same way. Now, the same tools apply. Why? Because what's a measurement? Let's think about that a minute. It's something we made up, isn't it? Right? A measurement is something we made up. Kilometers, meters, inches, centons, if you like Battlestar Galactica. I mean, come on. You might as well call it, what's that? It's my measurement of consciousness. Let's do it together. No, that's not quite it, but close enough. The funny thing about that is if you were serious about it and you decided that was going to be it and you like published a paper and people believed it, then that measurement will work just fine. David Bohm called the quantum potential, literally. It's the enfolded information that then pops into manifestation when you give it something to do. I read something very interesting. I think Paramahansa Yogananda said it, but it's also in a new book by Jay Alford called Brains and Realities, or I think it was published in 2006. Very interesting book, Brains and Realities. Talks about the idea that the void is full, the vacuum, and the universe is empty. In other words, the void is the real deal, and everything here is complete illusion. Now, how could that be? Well, it's pretty simple. If we're 99% nothing, right, and maybe that 1% is just what we think we are, that would make us 100% nothing with nothing doing, right? One of the easiest ways, again, to make a measurement is to decide an outcome and then do nothing, and then notice what changes. Now, how do you do nothing and have something change? Well, if the void is where everything pops from, and the void is described by us in our left brain reality as nothing, if we flip to right brain reality, what do we have? We have the inverse of nothing, which is the all. Confusing? Very useful confusing, isn't it? If your brain is confused, it means you're learning. Seriously. If something I say or something you encounter or something you read confuses you, it means you're learning. If you're not confused, you're assuming. I'm confused by everything. The carpet confuses me on a daily basis. I'm serious because I'm willing to walk so that each step takes me potentially into a different reality or a new experience or a new awareness. That would be a walking meditation, kind of like walking pneumonia with side benefits of inspiration and inhalation and illumination. Carpet as Buddhic meditation. Now, some of these carpets, particularly like in San Francisco, I believe that they were probably on LSD when they, made them. Like San Francisco, the Grateful Dead probably hired out people to lay down carpet where they were performing, and then people would see it and say, I want some of that, and then pretty soon San Francisco's got all this weird carpet. Mark and I wound up with our heads inside of the carpet in the first seminar we taught in San Francisco because, well, A, we're weird, and the carpet was weird, and we had a resonance phenomenon going there, and we wound up with our heads inside the carpet. I went to, just to say, don't do this at home. This is another one of those things, this is a morphic field of stupid, please do not duplicate it. When I was much younger, I experimented a little bit with altered states with chemical phenomenon, LSD, things like that. I went to The Exorcist on LSD. Just wanted to see, if I could hold it together. It was actually kind of interesting because on LSD, it split you into multiple awarenesses, so you could actually kind of even see how the movie was pieced together. It was actually less scary, which was kind of cool and useful because that would have been a really bad idea, and it is a really bad idea. Please don't do that. Drugs in general are a really bad idea. Why? Because what I'm talking about allows you to generate your own drugs. Why do you think people want drugs in the first place? They're looking for a way out. They're looking for a change, a doorway into a different perception. Well, this does that without any chemical substances, because your brain is capable of producing what looks like LSD. See, the thing is with LSD, Albert Hofmann discovered it. The thing with LSD is it was never what caused the hallucinations. The hallucinations were caused by how your brain chemistry reacted to the initiating substance. Well, the initiating substance can be a thought or a measurement. Now, a thought in itself can become a measurement. I mean, literally, what did Einstein do? He imagined riding on a wave of light and looked over at another one, and looked at I think it was the gravity of the Earth, and noticed whether or not the light bent. You see? That's a measurement. And he did it as a thought experiment. So it's obviously true that in order to do something like what we call the two-point process in matrix energetics, you do not have to touch a body. Why would it make sense to touch a body if bodies don't exist? It makes no sense whatsoever. However, we are so wed to that body of information and set of beliefs that we believe in order to change something in our physiology or our structure or our chemistry or our emotions, we need to do something to it in response. Well, that's a Newtonian measurement. And it goes right back to that Newtonian delusion. And Newton was a wonderful scientist, and he was also an alchemist. By the way, he was attempting to prove spiritual principles through physics and through mathematics. Because he believed in the Creator, he believed in God, he believed in a magical universe, he believed in the will of the Creator moving through the creation and being a part of that. He believed all these things, and he believed that the math and the physics actually would allow him to show people that. Well, all of that just got shined away when we went into so-called rational science, which was actually an irrational fear reaction to the church. This is true. You see, when you start threatening people like Galileo with, incarceration, torture, and burning at the stake, science gets affected. Science says, screw you, First, we're not going to believe in a God that's going to torture us. We think that's ridiculous. And so we're going to split off from God, and we're going to split off from church, because you guys have got it locked up there. And besides, if we say that we are in the realm that you claim to hold the keys to the kingdom to, then you're just going to torture us, and that sounds like a really bad idea. So what we're going to do is what Galileo did. He tried. He said there are primary and secondary qualities of matter. He said the primary qualities are the things you can measure, like distance, and weight, and density, and volume, okay? The secondary qualities were things like emotion, like love, and color, the subjective experience of color, right? These qualities would be called subjective, and these qualities, the so-called material objective qualities, those are objects, so they're objective. So we can comment upon what we can see, feel, touch, smell, and measure. So here's where the 2-point is really great, because the act of making a measurement gets you in the morphic field of science. See? And the left brain goes, ooh, it's science, we're happy. And the right brain goes, That's from Jurassic Park, right? You didn't say the magic word. The magic word is access. When your left brain's doing something, your right brain is free to do whatever else. So you want to perform a soft measurement, and that allows your right brain to move into states of multidimensional awareness. And that makes good drugs in your head. And when you make good drugs in your head, it changes, actually even can change the cortical structure of your anatomy of your brain. Did you know this? The same book, Brains and Realities by Jay Alfred, talks about a study that Newberg and D'Aquili, I believe, they're neuroscientists, made, where they looked at the cortical thickness of longtime meditators and saw that in certain areas of the brain they were thicker. Cool. Here's the thing. If you believe that's the only way to make your brain thicker, well, there's a lot of ways to make your brain thicker. Some of them useful, some of them not. Marijuana can make your cortical layers thicker. Trouble is, it makes it denser where you actually can't use the layers. They become useless. That's true. It deposits a tarry substance over the cortex of the brain. So that's not necessarily a useful concept either, is it? But cortical thickness, that's not a useful concept either. Remember what I talked about Einstein and how they tried to figure out why Einstein was so smart? Thought it must be because his brain was larger than everybody else's and it had more folds and undulations and there had to be a reason. You know what they found out? His brain was actually smaller. It was smaller. So there have been people who have had something called hydroencephaly. Heard of that? It means their brain is filled up with water. And so this water pushes like a bag on the cortical layers and it over time thins it. And there are cases where there's only a 1-inch layer of cortex over this big bag of water, and yet the person is tested as a verifiable genius. That means it's not in the brain. So if it's not in the brain and we can't measure it, oh, that's right, we can't measure things that we can't see, feel, because of Galileo and because of that whole torture me thing. It must be somewhere that we can't measure. Now, just because we can't consciously measure something, does that mean it can't be measured? No, it means using the rules that we've applied to the act of measuring objectively do not apply in the same way. Now, the same tools apply. Why? Because what's a measurement? Let's think about that a minute. It's something we made up, isn't it? Right? A measurement is something we made up. Kilometers, meters, inches, centons, if you like Battlestar Galactica. I mean, come on. You might as well call it, what's that? It's my measurement of consciousness. Let's do it together. No, that's not quite it, but close enough. The funny thing about that is if you were serious about it and you decided that was going to be it and you published a paper and people believed it, then that measurement worked just fine. David Bohm called the quantum potential, literally. It's the enfolded information that then pops into manifestation when you give it something to do. I read something very interesting. I think Paramahansa Yogananda said it, but it's also in a new book by J. Alford called Brains and Realities, or I think it was published in 2006. Very interesting book, Brains and Realities. Talks about the idea that the void is full, the vacuum, and the universe is empty. In other words, the void is the real deal, and everything here is complete illusion. Now, how could that be? Well, it's pretty simple. If we're 99% nothing, right, and maybe that 1% is just what we think we are, that would make us 100% nothing with nothing doing, right? One of the easiest ways, again, to make a measurement is to decide an outcome and then do nothing, and then notice what changes. Now, how do you do nothing and have something change? Well, if the void is where everything pops from, and the void is described by us in our left brain reality as nothing, if we flip to right brain reality, what do we have? We have the inverse of nothing, which is the all. Confusing? Very useful confusing, isn't it? If your brain is confused, it means you're learning. Seriously. If something I say or something you encounter or something you read confuses you, it means you're learning. If you're not confused, you're assuming. I'm confused by everything. The carpet confuses me on a daily basis. I'm serious, because I'm willing to walk so that each step takes me potentially into a different reality or a new experience or a new awareness. That would be a walking meditation, kind of like walking pneumonia, with side benefits of inspiration and inhalation and illumination. Carpet as Buddhic meditation. Now, some of these carpets, particularly like in San Francisco, I believe that they were probably on LSD when they, made them. Like San Francisco, the Grateful Dead probably hired out people to lay down carpet where they were performing, and then people would see it and say, I want some of that, and then pretty soon San Francisco's got all this weird carpet. Mark and I wound up with our heads inside of the carpet in the first seminar we taught in San Francisco because, well, A, we're weird, and the carpet was weird, and we had a resonance phenomenon going there, and we wound up with our heads inside the carpet. I went to, just to say, don't do this at home. This is another one of those things, this is a morphic field of stupid, please do not duplicate it. When I was much younger, I experimented a little bit with altered states with chemical phenomenon, LSD, things like that. I went to The Exorcist on LSD. Just wanted to see, if I could hold it together. It was actually kind of interesting because on LSD, it split you into multiple awarenesses, so you could actually kind of even see how the movie was pieced together, and it was actually less scary, which was kind of cool and useful, because that would have been a really bad idea, and it is a really bad idea. Please don't do that. Drugs in general are a really bad idea. Why? Because what I'm talking about allows you to generate your own drugs. Why do you think people want drugs in the first place? They're looking for a way out. They're looking for a change, a doorway into a different perception. Well, this does that without. So measurement is merely a tool to access states of consciousness. So the 2-point, quote, technique in matrix energetics, I called it a technique back when I was still a chiropractor, thinking like a chiropractor, thinking that I was doing something physical to a physical body. 'Tis not true. As long get their problem, as long as you don't, get their problem, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, I get that you're in pain and I feel your pain, Doesn't mean I have to have your pain.
Sounds True presents the Matrix Energetics Experience. Shift your consciousness with the healing energies and hidden frequencies of the universe, with author, teacher, and the founder of Matrix Energetics, Richard Bartlett.
So measurement is merely a tool to access states of consciousness. So the 2-point, quote, technique in matrix energetics, I called it a technique back when I was still a chiropractor, thinking like a chiropractor, thinking that I was doing something physical to a physical body. 'Tis not true. As long as you hold that as a standard, oh, I have a physical problem, so I need to do something physical to it so that my physical problem can go away. Can you just make my problem go away? Well, no. Because as long as it's a problem, that's a measurement. How much of it is a problem? How big a problem is it, right? Qualify for me on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you hurt today? Well, it's a 10, doctor. That's good. What if I do this? Yep, that's a 12. Stop it. Now, see, that 10 feels a lot better, doesn't it? Torture as medical science. There was a measurement called a neurological test. And this test, it's called Rosenberg's test, I believe. Anyway, the test goes like this. You get someone to make a fist right in front of their face, and you get them to contract their fist as hard as they can and pull their biceps towards their head. Then the doctor grabs the fist and pulls backwards really hard and says, strain really hard, and then let's go. And if you don't hit yourself in the head, then your cerebellar function is intact. That sounds just mean to me. There's another test to see if you're faking, where you put a blood pressure cuff on someone, you measure their blood pressure, and then you deliberately inflict pain on them in the place where they say they're hurting and see if their blood pressure changes. That sounds sort of medieval to me too. It's medieval, it's not completely evil, but it's getting there. Anytime you're making a measurement based upon whether you can torture someone and get away with it, that's pretty medieval, you know. So your measurements determine your assessments. Your assessments determine your perceptions about reality, which determines your experience of reality. Okay? And we make these assessments all the time, but what we do is we create least action pathways where we make them unconsciously. Why? Well, do you want to be driving and suddenly forget how to drive unconsciously? No. Because what do? You've learned to turn that over to the parallel processor, which can, track that 11 million or 11 billion bits of information per second? And you're looking at the weather, you're looking at your speed, you're looking out for police, right? You're looking for implements in the road, you're checking the speed of your vehicle relative to the other vehicles, you're aware of the motorcycle coming up in your peripheral vision, right? Your children are yelling in the back and you're aware of who started the argument, you know? All these things more or less simultaneously, but what then happens, of course, is in order to focus on any of them, to perform a measurement, you have to shift the focus of your attention to the one thing, perform that measurement, and then shift back. Yes? That's the difference between, again, the serial processor, the conscious mind, or the left brain, and the parallel processor. You want the parallel processor to be assessing for danger, to be scanning spatially in awareness, and then to immediately collapse the wave function of all these possible things into, look, there's danger ahead, or watch out for that motorcycle coming up on your left. So again, it's not kind or useful to shut off the left brain or to denigrate its function. Give it something to do. But give it something to do that more or less is like coyote shamanism. It's the trickster. While the left brain is performing the measurement, you immediately, because you've got this quantum mythology that I'm providing with you, you immediately are actually in non-ordinary reality. It pops you into parallel dimensional experiences. And pretty soon the left brain starts to actually be in the driver's seat for altered experience, and that's why you don't have to meditate to get there. No, I did not know any of that when Matrix Energetics came into being. I had no clue, right? I was a chiropractor. I would feel a body and then feel this stuck, hard, rigid area on a body. William, come here for a minute. Now, I know you can't see this on the program that you're listening to. That's okay. Pretend. Don't do it while you're driving. So I'm going to Go ahead and have this experience. I'm going to touch William, but I'm going to allow William to represent everyone that's listening. I'm going to touch William right between his shoulder blades with one hand. What I'm looking for with my one hand is to find an area that feels different than the rest of his body, where it feels tight or rigid or stuck. In my mind, the way I've chosen to measure, and it's just arbitrary, I've decided that when something feels tight or stuck or rigid, the molecules are compressed. The energy is denser. There's more information that, call it stuck. The potential is not flowing as smoothly, okay? Not be true. Now, I'm going to take my other hand and I'm going to move it out some distance from William and your body, and then I'm just going to let go and watch the ripples. The moment I move my second hand out some distance from the body, it's like you're looking for a magnetic field where there's something, this tug and attraction between the 2 points. Now, you've already learned how to begin to do this, because if you have succeeded in extending your mind from your right foot, where you've put your left foot in front of your right and then created a point, then notice that point once you move your foot away. It's exactly what I'm talking about. You're performing a measurement. In the quantum realm, which ye are, the act of measuring collapses the wave function of what you're observing. The observer and the observed becomes quantum entangled, and both of you change. This allows you access to limitless states of potential, limitless realms of consciousness. You may feel as if a pebble dropped into a pond. Let your awareness, your conscious awareness, you could even make your first point as you're listening to me, be some problem or condition or disease or concern. That's stuck hard and rigid. It's not moving. It's not changing. It's not adapting, growing, morphing. Allow that point to be your fixed point of reference, because you're certainly fixated on it, and understandably so. So that's your first point. Now, ask yourself a question and allow the question to be open-ended. Your question is going to be the pebble or your intent, what you throw into the pond of universal consciousness, the creative vacuum, the 0-point field, the mind of God, as it's been called by some scientists. So now, if you've allowed yourself to focus on that one point, kind of like Jack Palance in City Slickers, as I was talking about earlier in this program, let that one thing be the focus of your attention for just long enough to notice it. That's your first point. Now, while retaining that first point, but not dwelling on it from an emotional state of need, desire, lack, just notice it. Now, move out a ways and ask this question, and let the question be the pebble that you drop at the second point, which is, what if it were different now? And drop the pebble. And then see the ripples in the pond of your consciousness expand outward in concentric rings. Each ring becomes an interference pattern. It starts to create standing waves of new information that interfaces with the pond of your awareness, that moves you outside of the problem state into a whole new subset of possibility. You can do this over and over and over again. If the first time you do it, you don't feel anything, do it again. But wait a day. Don't bore yourself. If you don't feel something, just say, I didn't feel anything. That's interesting. There is no such thing as failure. There is only results and information. Every time you do this, it is a law of quantum physics. You achieve an outcome. There is a result. And it is observable, but it may not be observable from the lens of your habitual perception. If you're not observing something from the lens of your habitual perception, rotate your head backwards. That's right. Just see out of the back of your head and do it again. Take your first point. Ask yourself, what's the point of what Dr. Bartlett's saying? Make that your first point. Now, take the second point and extend it out from you some distance. There you go, till you feel a change. Ooh, I feel the resistance. I feel a tug. I feel something. That something is your second point. And say, what if I did understand what Dr. Bartlett's saying and drop the pebble? That can certainly institute change. When you pay attention to what shows up differently, you're now giving the conscious mind the ability to instantly shift perspective and to be in lockstep with the gleanings from the irrational or so-called right brain superconscious awareness. You start to actually entrain the left brain to listen to the child. The child could be very analogous to the innocent perception of the right brain, which does not judge, does not analyze, does not even measure. So the act of measuring allows you to give the left brain a task, but then here's where the measurement potential can change for you. Once you measure, you have to let go. If you measure and then you try to determine in the next moment if something has changed, all you've done is measure something not changing. This reinforces the state of no change. The more you reinforce the state of no change, the more no change you get. And if you're not already doing it in what you call your so-called life, realize that according to parallel universe theory, there is some parallel you that is. And so it might be a simple matter of letting go of what you're doing or not doing, and again, accessing multidimensional awareness and finding the resonance with the one that does do that, dropping into that place and letting go and allowing that to become to the forefront. This is something that the remote viewer, Joe McMoneagle, talks about. He says one of the reasons he's such a good remote viewer, he is the government's 007, his actual remote viewing number is 001, close enough, is he said that he believes that there's a remote viewer himself 25 years in the future who sends the perceptions back to him in the present moment. Now, time does not exist. Scientists can tell you that if you take the equations for time and you plug them in, they can run forwards or backwards. They work either way. Now, what we tend to say is there's only such a thing as forward time because that is how our habitual lens of perception is set up, where that is what we've been trained to notice. We've not been trained to notice that we could perhaps change a perception in the present moment and have that retroactively change the past. But it can and does. If you are made of photons, which you are, and if photons can travel backwards and forwards in time, then you can too. And if you take David Bohm's idea, the physicist, of the hidden variable or the quantum potential, and you realize that quantum potential is enfolded with consciousness, that means you could take a specific intent, a specific consciousness, tag that onto the photons and send that traveling backward in time and have it unfold at the target moment. And I believe that's what Jesus did to raise Lazarus from the dead. I believe when he prayed to Father, he was praying to the undivided one, the undivided spirit, which you could even call the consciousness of the 0-point field, that undifferentiated consciousness, and said, Father, I know as thou hearest me always. Always means in front, in the future, in the past, sideways. There is no time, so therefore all dimensions of awareness, you hear me always. And it is only for those that do not know this that I even bother to say, Lazarus, come forth. because it is already done. You see, it is instantaneous. This is why it's such a trap to apply methodologies and techniques and modalities to conditions, because conditions are like the Borg in Star Trek. Conditions will learn. They learn and they adapt. What you do one time or maybe even 3 times will work or could work. What you do the 4th time probably won't. Because what you've done is you've taught that condition how to be smarter and more powerful and more effective by giving it new strategies from which to diversify its approach. Because of all its consciousness, and your conditions are merely fields of information as vortexes of energy that are imprinted with thought patterns that then create an outcome that pops into physical reality, then whatever you do in response to a condition makes it stronger, potentially. This is not to say don't take your drugs or do chemotherapy or surgery or radiation or take vitamins or eat, quote, right for your health. I have a problem with that one, but because the word right is very subjective. I can eat bacon all day long and my cholesterol goes, we loves the bacon. Doesn't raise my cholesterol because I have insulin resistance. I have a blood sugar condition that likes protein. Now, someone else tries that, disaster. But it's individual, and consciousness is individual, and conditions are individual, and we need to stop treating them like tinker toys that are all assembled in the same manner with the same components. Every single time there's a cancer, even if it's the same cancer, it's completely different. Therefore, an approach that is based upon always doing the same thing the same way will work some of the time because there's a morphic field called I believe your approach will work. The god of placebo, right? Big morphic field. He wears oak leaves and not much else. And then there's the so-called alternative field, which is the same stuff, just dressed up a little differently. It might have dressing on it, you know, but it's the same tossed salad. And what we're attempting to do is convince ourselves and bargain with ourselves and act from a point of no trust that truly the Father wouldn't give us every perfect and good thing if we asked for it.
Sounds True presents the Matrix Energetics Experience, Session 5, with Richard Bartlett.
Now here's a problem. I'm not going to tell you I talked to Jesus. I talked to Jesus about this, but I hallucinated. And if preachers can share a word with Jesus or share the word of Jesus, well, Jesus, I think I can too. Because when I look at them talking, I like what I say more. No offense to them, because they have a purpose, they have an audience, they have a presence, and they feed a need. And God bless them. But I wondered why people did not heal like they used to. Because it seemed pretty easy when Jesus was doing it, and I'm not so sure it was just because he was Jesus. Okay, well and good, if that's what it is, I'm down with that. Jesus, yes. But here's the thing. What he or some part of me said in response to my question, always ask the question that you don't know, you see? And then be surprised by an answer, then it's probably a real answer. What he said is, back at the time, 2,000 years ago, there were no doctors. There were no medications. There certainly was no advertising on TV about all these medications and doctors and conditions. That is a lot of electromagnetic noise. That electromagnetic noise creates a huge grid of interference. Those grids of interference break up any congruent, coherent thought that is less strong than that morphic field. So 2,000 years ago, there was not very much that would actually break up healing. Healing, you could throw that pebble of healing into the water and the water would remain still because it immediately manifested. Now we have all these conditional realities that are very individual and unique that we've tapped into and created this very complex individual tapestry that determines what will or won't work with a given individual in a given moment. So one of the ways to get back to the ability for these things to occur would possibly be to time travel back to the time of Jesus. How do you time travel back to the time of Jesus? With your mind. I was trained by Lynn Buchanan, who was one of the original remote viewers in the Stargate program. Actually, I believe he was a monitor. But Lynn, at some point, was doing remote viewing. And Lynn told me that for a number of days on end, they targeted Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator. And it was Lynn's job to get into Idi Amin's mind to know his feelings, his thoughts, his actions, and predict outcomes. This means you have to become the man. You have to become him. And then what you do is you calm the interference waves called you and bring in the interference pattern called Idi Amin. Well, this is very bad if you're going home to your children and your family. And so he had to mentally and psychically detoxify every day. Well, after a long time, say 6 weeks, I don't remember how long he told me, but after a long time, he said, please, can you please just not do this to me anymore? This is terrible. At one point, he got so far into Idi Amin that he came back. He has blue eyes, and his eyes were brown. Now, this is a bit scary. He looked in the mirror and went, this has gone too far. These things can happen because we are not physical beings. We're just deluded into thinking so. Therefore, changing blue eyes to brown, no big deal. Or anything else, having tumors fall off, like snowflakes melting in the sun. No big deal. But it is a big deal to the morphic field of the reality construct that we hold to be true and self-evident. No offense to them, because they have a purpose, they have an audience, they have a presence, and they feed a need. And God bless them. But I wondered why people did not heal like they...
Sounds True presents the Matrix Energetics Experience, Session 5, with Richard Bartlett.
Now here's a problem. I'm not going to tell you I talked to Jesus. I talked to Jesus about this, but I hallucinated. And if preachers can share a word with Jesus or share the word of Jesus, well, Jesus, I think I can too. Because when I look at them talking, I like what I say more. No offense to them, because they have a purpose, they have an audience, they have a presence, and they feed a need. And God bless them. But I wondered why people did not heal like they used to. Because it seemed pretty easy when Jesus was doing it, and I'm not so sure it was just because he was Jesus. Okay, well and good, if that's what it is, I'm down with that. Jesus, yes. But here's the thing. What he or some part of me said in response to my question, always ask the question that you don't know, you see? And then be surprised by an answer, then it's probably a real answer. What he said is, back at the time, 2,000 years ago, there were no doctors. There were no medications. There certainly was no advertising on TV about all these medications and doctors and conditions. That is a lot of electromagnetic noise. That electromagnetic noise creates a huge grid of interference. Those grids of interference break up any congruent, coherent thought that is less strong than that morphic field. So 2,000 years ago, there was not very much that would actually break up healing. Healing, you could throw that pebble of healing into the water and the water would remain still because it immediately manifested. Now we have all these conditional realities that are very individual and unique that we've tapped into and created this very complex individual tapestry that determines what will or won't work with a given individual in a given moment. So one of the ways to get back to the ability for these things to occur would possibly be to time travel back to the time of Jesus. How do you time travel back to the time of Jesus? With your mind. I was trained by Lynn Buchanan, who was one of the original remote viewers in the Stargate program. Actually, I believe he was a monitor. But Lynn, at some point, was doing remote viewing. And Lynn told me that for a number of days on end, they targeted Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator. And it was Lynn's job to get into Idi Amin's mind to know his feelings, his thoughts, his actions, and predict outcomes. This means you have to become the man. You have to become him. And then what you do is you calm the interference waves called you and bring in the interference pattern called Idi Amin. Well, this is very bad if you're going home to your children and your family. And so he had to mentally and psychically detoxify every day. Well, after a long time, say 6 weeks, I don't remember how long he told me, but after a long time, he said, please, can you please just not do this to me anymore? This is terrible. At one point, he got so far into Idi Amin that he came back. He has blue eyes, and his eyes were brown. Now, this is a bit scary. He looked in the mirror and went, this has gone too far. These things can happen because we are not physical beings. We're just deluded into thinking so. Therefore, changing blue eyes to brown, no big deal. Or anything else, having tumors fall off, like snowflakes melting in the sun. No big deal. But it is a big deal to the morphic field of the reality construct that we hold to be true and self-evident. All men are not, all men are created equal, and from that point on, everything goes completely individual. So, what Lynn did, he came into work one day and they gave him a target. In remote viewing, they gave you an index card that was in a sealed envelope, and they said, describe the target. It was called a blind target. And they give you a set of coordinates that were randomly generated, and that would allow you access into the grid of the matrix, you see. So, he's into this reading, and he's describing the process, and he starts to get this overwhelming feel of reverence and awe. And then he starts to cry. And then he says, whatever you think this man did, I don't think he did it. I've never met anyone I like more. I feel profoundly affected by having been in the presence of this person. And then they opened the blind target, and it was Jesus. So here's the big problem with that. If you follow the Bible, which has been manipulated and created in a lot of ways to put forth a certain theology and a certain dogma and a certain aspect of control, you're not going to be able to find that frequency. If you go with even the word Jesus, you may have trouble finding that frequency because it is so polluted with so many tapestries of possibility that how do you know? You go by feeling, don't you? I just told you how you know. That feeling of reverence and awe and that quiet feeling, that spiritual feeling of wow. Wow is a big key. just so you know. Spiritual wonder. Any kind of wonderment and awe at anything in the moment. If it's, I thought I was going to get this, and wow, that was what the remote viewers taught. Find the aesthetic impact. That's where you're hitting the boundary between your beliefs about the way things are and the way things might be in the matrix. See? So if you go back and you perhaps call Jesus Yeshua ben David, not too many people call him that, you see? But it has a morphic field, but it has a very specific identity and address in the matrix. See? Now you move backward 2,000 years and you look for that signature. Your intent to find it will lead you there. Ask and it shall be answered. Knock on the door shall be opened. Now, I think, again, success leaves clues. If you would like to, listening to me, if you would like to heal your, quote, heal your condition, don't go to a doctor. Doctors are designed by their education to look for what's wrong with you. Healing is not about looking at what's wrong for you, but unfortunately healing has become the flip side of disease. So in order to heal something, you have to be trained in a relationship with disease and disorder. This is why I don't say what I do is healing. Because as soon as I say that, I'm now collapsed the wave function of possibility into only the limited outcomes that I can imagine. You don't want the limited outcomes you can imagine, you want the unimaginable outcome. Because that cannot be controlled by your left brain. And if you're working from a perspective control, you're in the Newtonian world where things bump up against each other, kinetic motion, and the laws of thermodynamics, and dissipation and entropy. There is a different law that actually turns everything on its head. It inverts it inside out, where things converge and cohere and move backwards in time, something called negative time. And this negative time is actually a physics principle. So if you're looking to perform, quote, healing, you have to jettison all the baggage and the modalities and the hallucinations and even the generalizations of what that means. Let go of all meaning, drop a pure innocent perception into the pond, and then notice what shows up. If you can do that, you can tap a unsullied, unpolluted morphic field of possibility for that to occur. That's not to say, if you're a doctor, stop being a doctor. Although I've had some doctors come to seminars that I've taught, and they have literally said afterwards, I don't know. I asked them what they are, and they said, well, I was a doctor. I don't know what I am now, but I'm excited about what I may become. This is the attitude that gets the response from the universe. I'm excited about what I may become in the next moment, not restricting the flow of one moment to the outcome of the next moment. Therefore, you can be continually surprised, and therefore you can be like a little child, and therefore you can enter into the kingdom of heaven, which is within. Very interesting. If you enter into the kingdom of heaven, which is within, you wind up without a care, for one thing. But here's the thing. It's very interesting. If the void is full and the universe is empty, that means moving within, you actually go without. So if you want to expand your field and expand the force of your awareness and to be able to actually command the forces of nature, not in an arrogant way, as I've already pointed out, then by going within and letting go of thought and letting go of need and letting go of desire and letting go of emotion and letting go of outcome, that's where the answer occurs instantly. It's a whole different meaning and understanding. Deepak Chopra talks about this in his new book that I'm just reading, The Third Jesus. He mentions some of these things that I'm just talking about, even though I haven't read the book yet, but I know they're in there because I glanced through it. These things are universal principles. And you know why I think they're coming now? We don't have time to meditate for 30 years to become masters. The time is short. There must be not a better way, but a different way. There must be an opening. Whatever man can conceive of, man can achieve. So if you start to conceive of the possibility and you start to see it echoed in your culture, like I said, where my hairstylist is a quantum physics professor, it's getting a little weird out there. Getting a little weird. And this is a hopeful sign, because if you embrace the unusual, then more of it shows up. This is something Carl Jung, when he came up with the idea with Wolfgang Pauli, a physicist, about synchronicity. What Jung noticed was really simple and interesting synchronicities. When you were happy and joyous and wanted them and liked them and were noticing them, more of them occurred. Gee, how simple is that? Enjoy what's happening, learn to let go of judgment about whether it does or not, or how it has to, and then just allow more of same, please, like a little child. A little child never doubts that mom or dad isn't going to get them whatever it is they want. Now, there may be some wheedling, whining, and cajoling involved at times, but the point is the child trusts that the universe, which is the mother and father, will provide. It's a given. It's inherent within the whole equation of mother and child. That's the same with the universe. One of the ways to be able to notice something is to get into a physiology where you're aware of things. Most of us, we're so tense that we are not relaxed enough to shift into what's called by Carlos Castaneda second attention. So a very simple exercise, and it's similar to something Yogananda did. You can lift your shoulders even higher than they normally are around your ears. Just do it now while you're listening, unless you're driving. Lift your shoulders just as close as you get to your ears, and then make your whole body just as tense as it could possibly ever get. Yeah, imagine your teacher or someone, significant other, or something yelling at you. A train, perhaps. And then just take a breath and let go and drop your shoulders. When you drop your shoulders, you may feel like you spin right out of the top of your head. It's okay to spin out of the top of your head, by the way, as long as you know where your feet are and where your head is. If you know that, then you have access to simultaneously being in the world and not of the world. You actually can embody and be a body of information simultaneously. When you have both, that's how you walk through life as a living miracle. Every moment of life becomes a miracle. And if you expect the miracle, just like the synchronicities, and you love them, they will occur. And then when you do that, and other people begin to do it with you throughout the world, as you're listening to this program, you're programming the consciousness of miracles into the morphic field. Now, it doesn't matter if it's matrix energetics or it's whatever you want to call it, as long as the effect is that there's an uplifting of consciousness, there is a healing of sorrows and suffering, and not so much good, because it's okay, by the way, to be stirred up. It's okay to feel awful. Awful can be useful because awful is also a way to perform a measurement. There are times in seminars where I've been on stage talking and people would just go out and throw up. And because they felt like they were literally spinning and being uncomfortable, or having more pain rather than less, or being tenser, or being more angry is okay. I was in a presentation a number of years ago where I was talking about matrix energetics, nowhere in the depth that I do now, because I've allowed every step to teach me more. And I was talking and talking, and then I heard my guides tell me, my guides are just perhaps my parallel processing of my right brain appearing to be a voice outside of myself. But it doesn't matter if it is or isn't. It gives me access to information I wouldn't have otherwise. So I was told, go get off the stage and walk out into the audience and touch that man in the third row. They're laughing because that wasn't a man I touched, but I like to confuse the issue. So when I touched this man, he dropped unconscious in my hands and got this beautiful smile on his face. Now that's great, and I'm kind of used to that. That seems normal to me. The rest of the story is, he sent me an email. He said, I am so glad you touched me, because I might have been in jail. Because as you were talking, I kept getting angrier and angrier. And I was so tense and so angry, I was about to come up and pop you in the mouth. And when you stepped down and touched me on the head, all the anger flew out of the top of my head and left me, and it's never returned. And my life is changed profoundly. Thank you so much. You never know. You never know what the next miracle will be, but if you trust, you can be sure it will occur. You need to develop a little practice of trusting in the inner voice and not being so sure about the voices on your TV or the voices in your media or the voices in the newspapers. That doesn't mean you don't want to be aware. Jesus said, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Know everything, embrace everything, learn everything, question everything. But then reserve a little space where you can feel what resonates with you. Now, we talk about dropping into the heart, and here's an easy way to do it. By the way, studies have shown that the field of the heart, the energy field of the heart, it's toroidal in shape. So it's kind of shaped like a donut, and it spins. So this big donut that spins expands out a circumference of some measured to be somewhat 12 feet. So with this audience of 150 people that are listening to me, and by the way, that field of information of the audience is imprinted on the program that you're listening to and within the program, so it is enfolded in as hidden potential, quantum potential. That field, you're all interpenetrating each other. So it's that quantum entanglement thing. And this field, we're not talking about a mythological chakra. I don't necessarily believe chakras exist. You see, chakras are, again, a conventional accepted culture. First, it's a Hindu or Indian culture, and then we've grafted it onto our Western civilization. But if you look at something expecting to see a chakra, then you will see a chakra. Does that mean it's there? No more than your physical body is there. I'm pretty sure if the electron doesn't exist, except for when you look at it, chakras don't either. Now, does this free you? Because some people think they have to, in order to heal, they have to work with the chakra system. Excuse me. Any system is a collection of beliefs. Any collection of beliefs is suspect. You can drop to the empty set and see what happens in the next moment. It frees you from quite a bit of work and worry and concern, and it also helps you to learn from within yourself. If you can learn from within yourself, then the outer learning is just gravy. It's just, the icing on the cake. You can have it, but listen to what your inner teacher provides, because there may come a time when we won't have access to our outer teachers. So you need to sit with the inner teacher and develop the ability to listen and trust. When you listen and trust, you are safe. You're held within the arms of the beloved. You are absolutely, every step, every breath is guided. Like I said, God's an accountant, your hairs are numbered. So one of the ways that you drop into your heart, which is where you access the voice that you can trust, That toroidal field, by the way, if it is a spinning vortex, what does it also do? It imprints information. It has the ability to access quantum potential. That toroidal spinning field has the ability to transcend space-time. By the way, space-time is seen as a geometry. And the toroidal field is a hyperdimensional geometry and transcends space-time geometry. And again, if you transcend space-time geometry, in the next moment you pop back into space-time geometry and things can be different. Completely different. So to access this toroidal field of hyperdimensional geometry, which is your vehicle of consciousness to move the octaves of awareness of multi-potential possibility, do this again. Contract your shoulders, lift them up towards your ears, contract your butt, and tuck your chin in. Now, this is called the startle reflex. You can let go now. And drop down and relax even more. Now, if you've ever seen a guy with a big beer belly riding a motorcycle, let yourself get into that position where your belly sticks out, your tailbone drops down, your shoulders drop down, your head goes back, and you feel the wind on your face. Interestingly enough, this exact posture is called in Tibetan Qigong, embrace the tree. This is true. What does this do? It relaxes your entire body, puts your spine in alignment, allows your energy to flow unimpeded, and it takes you out of fight or flight physiology. Fight or flight physiology does not allow you access to the spatial awareness kingdom or frequency domain of the right brain, and hence the field of the heart. If you're too stressed out, then it's difficult to access the heart. And here's one of the things that can happen is you could take that stressed out energy and encode it into the heart, and that's why we have heart attacks. I don't think it's because of our diet. I think we're taking the wrong energy potentials and putting it in the wrong place and then holding it there. And it burns us out. But as soon as you let go, they self-correct. It's almost like you're artificially holding yourself there. It's very unnatural to hold yourself artificially in that tense state. Our natural state is this relaxed, trusting, graceful awareness. As soon as you drop into that, everything's possible. So much more possible. Now, that tucked chin, tucked butt, raised shoulder position is literally what you get if you shout at a little baby. It's a nervous system, primitive nervous system response to protect. If you just blow air in a baby's face, you'll see that startle response. The trouble is, we in our society are constantly in the startle response, and therefore in the left brain, which is run off of epinephrine, which generates us to be in the moment where we have to pay attention to the very next moment, what could kill us, what could interact with us, what could create a stress or problem. And this is why meditation is a boon and necessary, but it's only necessary until you decide it's not. And this is what the great meditators would tell you at some point. You entrain consciousness and you learn to live in that. At the Monroe Institute, I went to their Gateway program, and then I went to their Guidelines program, which teaches you how to access your inner voices or inner guidance. And they had an exercise where you would learn the frequency domain. Remember, she talked about the kingdom, the domain of the king. Well, there's a frequency spectrum or domain of consciousness, and they taught certain dependable frequency domains that would access these key states. Once you learn what they are for you and you measure them, you perform a measurement and you collapse the wave function into that, it is much easier to get back to it and to re-experience it at will. If you have to be in the optimum consciousness in order for something to occur, when an emergency occurs, it's too late. It's too late. Too late, Luther. Too late. I had a life-changing experience that you would not expect it to come this way, but those are the ones that you really want to pay attention to. I got really mad at somebody, murderously mad one time, and I was actually in a car, and I found my fist clenching, and I just wanted to pound on the car, and I was just so upset. And then my guides told me, sit on your hands. Good plan, you know, if you feel like lashing out. So I sat on my hands, and I dropped my shoulders, and all of a sudden what I was experiencing as anger, as physiology, as rage response, if you want to call it that, just became electromagnetic energy. I felt this tremendous current running through me that was stripped of all emotion. And I realized it was just unlimited potential. And when I realized that, it never had the same response, because every time I feel that, I went, I'm missing out on a lot of wonderful energy here. And you just drop down and you go, wow, look at all that potential. What can we move with that? And then you put that potential into your 2-point as a feeling state versus a feeling, and you have an enormous charge for change. I've noticed something about sadness, the perception of sadness. I don't believe that mankind is meant to be sad. It's not that you would suppress your emotions, but what if that energy of, quote, sadness is just, again, another aspect of an infinite frequency domain? What I've noticed is that when I'm feeling sad is when I'm disconnected from the moment. And when I'm disconnected from the moment, I am literally outside of my body. And you can learn to, again, making a 2-point or a measurement, I can learn when I'm sad to ask, where am I? That question, where am I, performs a measurement, and it will give you an accurate assessment as you practice. So I ask, where am I? And I'll usually find I'm, say, maybe 1.5 to 2 feet outside of my body, right in front of my chest. That's where the sadness is. Now, if that's a point of awareness, stripped of all charge, and you just reel it in, just move it back in towards your heart. Not all the way if it doesn't want to go. If it stops somewhere, trust that. But you move it back in, you will notice an immediate change in that perception of that emotion. I've done it enough times now, I'm very sure that this always occurs. Thing like this, if you don't have that tool as a resource, you never experience the change. Therefore, you do not understand how free you are, how useful and resourceful a tool like that can be, because you've just never exercised the right to have that experience. Now, again, I'm not suppressing emotion. All I'm doing is creating a reference where when I move in, I expand out. The infiniteness of my being actually becomes more ensouled in my physical surrounding. That's an amazing thing. You see, you think the power is in your control over your environment. It's completely the opposite. The more you try to control, the more you will lose control. The more you try to control your temper, the more you will find ways to express your temper. The more you try and control a habit like smoking, the more the habit will control you. Because you're in the paradigm of control over something, exerting a force in order for something to happen. That force is always external, and it always comes outside of yourself. And the more externalized that force, the less access to real power you have. When you move within, and this does not have to be a complicated, long-standing task. It's a practice thing. If you imagine that you're in a tub, do this with me. You're in a tub, and it's a round tub, so you fit, it's complete circumference, like, say, oh, I don't know, maybe 12 feet in circumference, kind of like that heart toroidal field. So you're in this tub of water. You ever seen those little bobbing things that you fish with to determine if you have a bite? Put a little red bob right in front of you there, right? Now, let's just move it out a distance and feel something. There. Now move it a different distance and feel something else. Notice if a feeling shows up in your body, if a sensation shows up in your body in a different place or in a different way when you move the bob to different locations. As you start to notice this, and if you don't notice it at first, just pretend. It's okay. You don't have to really be able to do this. You probably won't be able to do it anyway. I never really feel these things. The wonderful thing about tinkers is tinker's a wonderful thing. The heart is made of rubber. It's a bouncy, bouncy spring. And happy, 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 happy thing. My life is a joy. I'm a tinker sort of thing. The photons, the very photons in the air around you begin to dance with joy when you do something silly like that. Now notice your bob. Oh, well, first thing, you've made a bunch of turbulent waves in your fluid. Guess what? Those turbulent waves are happy. It is okay to have turbulence in your life. It is a good, useful thing. Even if something is happening that doesn't appear so nice at the time. Like when I told you earlier in this program that my hands are cramping up and making fists where my fingernails were being driven into my palms, it brought matrix energetics into manifestation. The fact that I had to travel these long distances, the fact that my son bit me on the finger and hurt me, made me reticent to stick my finger in the little child's mouth to the lazy eye, and therefore I trusted the big guy with the blue, not necessarily something you would normally trust unless you have a big reference for trusting Superman, and miracles occurred. So your worst case scenarios might be your greatest miracles if you simply alter the frequency domain within which they are functioning. Move the bob out a little ways and see how that feels. Move it closer and observe what happens. If you begin to do this with every aspect of your life will come under your command, not your control. There is a very big difference. Command is an aspect of the consecrated heart. The very elements of nature will listen to the commands of the consecrated heart. Control, the universe goes, not happening. And then you have more of the same, right? Misery loves company, and here's more. Your relatives just arrived. It's the theory of relatives rather than relativity. So, it is so against the way we've been programmed in our society to let go and trust, and then realize by letting go and trust, you actually gain command over all the things that you couldn't let go of. It's very paradoxical. And it's very simple and very childlike. Because once you trust, there's no reason to control anything. And that is a wonderful place to be. And by the way, you don't have to be there any more than the blink of an eye. Again, it is okay to just have a horrible temper. Just go for it. Indulge it. Throw things at walls, you know. Take your own poo and throw it at the wall, and then finger paint, "I hate my life," on the walls. I'm sure if your life stinks, that will help. Well, if you become like a little child, that's something a child might do. Now try and go there. You bet you can't. You're going to see those walls the rest of your life. When the walls turn into happy thoughts, then it's time for you to leave. Dr. Dunn, at one point, when he was studying with me, he came in one day and said, "Well, I'm not going to be with you tomorrow. I went, so sure are we? I had to play Master Po, right? It's like, so sure are we, young grasshopper, you know? And he said, well, I have something else I have to do. So important is it? Yoda, right? And then I looked at him and I said, I literally said this because I'm just not very nice. I said, grasshopper, when you could walk across the room without having rice water stools, then it is time for you to go. He came in the next day on time with diarrhea. Thank you very much. Yeah, that unconscious mind is pretty fun sometimes. So the unconscious mind is just listening for us. The trouble is, guess who it's been listening to? The madman that runs the asylum, the left brain. And it's not the purview or the domain, the frequency domain at all of that part of the mind. We literally have to create these nasty images if we want to have, you know, nasty lives. We have to create these nasty images of having a nasty life and then making sure it gets into the unconscious that then can connect with the collective unconscious, that then can connect with the morphic field, that then creates a quantum potential, that then goes into the vacuum, actually structures the vortexes of the vacuum with the I suck potential, then pops it out as a real experience. The physics of suckage. Sounds silly when I say it that way, doesn't it? And it sounds like physics too, because it is. So if it's physics, that means there's observable ways to change it. And one way is to decide. Now, you cannot make your life better by deciding to make your life better. Because what are you doing? Say after me, that would be control. Yeah, let's just get it on tape. That would be control. Not going to work so well. That's why visualizing what you want and then putting affirmations up on your mirror and then reading it every morning, you know, isn't going to necessarily attract you what you want. Because most of us, or a lot of us, when we're trying to get what we want, we're trying to avoid what we don't want, and we're in a polarity or duality of a relationship with that. So every time we focus on what we want, we're also focusing on what we don't want, and guess what we fear more? Not what we want. And the thing you fear comes upon you because it is the thing you give the strongest undercurrent of your emotion into the ocean of your conscious awareness, which then creates the ripples that creates your life. Doesn't sound so useful that way either, does it? So I don't know if the secret is to actually like attract these things to you, because you're going to attract the polarities and the dualities. Stop it with attracting things. Stop it with trying to control things. Stop it with trying to think you know better or know what you want or should have. It's okay to pretend you know what you want and should have, but just don't be so serious that you take up all the parallel processing with what you think it is you want. If you allow for a little wiggle room, and it doesn't take much because grace is a huge wiggle space, just a tiny wiggle room, like, well, what I'd like is Santa Claus, God, Jesus, and give them your list, and then go, but I really don't know, and it's okay if you have a better idea, and thank you, respectfully, your friend. And then what do? You let go. And you can't pretend to let go. It doesn't work. If you're the monkey holding on to the fruit, all God has to do is look and see the fruits of your labor and realize you're still holding on to them. You're still in the same box. The only way to escape the box is stop trying to escape the box. If you allow yourself to be in the box and not the box at the same time, you're performing Schrodinger's famous experiment of the cat in the box. Is it alive or is it dead? You don't know until you look at it, so don't look. Surprise me. Now, I want to tell you how real that can be. By the way, Stephen Hawking got so tired of people talking about that cat because it's so mean. It sounds like Aleister Crowley, again, as a physicist. Let's put a cat into the box, right, and put a cyanide capsule in there, and let's put a sensor in there so that when you open the box, it triggers the cyanide. And then if you don't look, is the cat still alive because you haven't collapsed the wave function of it being dead yet? That was the experiment, essentially. Well, Stephen Hawking said, I'm so tired of that damned Schrodinger's cat experiment that if I see the cat, I'll shoot it. He said that. I read it in one of the many books I read for this second book. I think that's a really useful way to look at it, right? Get over yourself. Stop being so serious. Stop obsessing about things that can't make a bit of difference. It's like if you obsess every day with how much pain you're in, or you obsess every day with why, you know, your finances never change, or why you just can't find the right relationship, then what are you doing? You're putting the information out there. More of the same, please, because it's working so well. If you let go and trust, then you can have a soft measurement about what you'd like. It's kind of like, hey, yeah. And that'll do it. Because that soft measurement leaves wiggle room for God to enter into the equation. In the complex conjugate equation in physics, there is a real number and there's an imaginary number. The imaginary number is necessary in order, when you multiply the complex number together, in order to define a vector in real-time space, actual coordinates. If the imaginary number is there, it doesn't work. So imagination and, quote, real are vibratory qualities of the same complex conjugate equation, which is called reality. Your life. If you don't have the ability to imagine angels on a bridge before you actually get to a bridge that is set to take your life, then maybe the angel isn't there and the bridge is, you see? But if you allow just a tiny, 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 tiny little playtime every day, like, oh, I don't know, out of every hour, allow a minute. Then out of every minute, allow a second. Out of every second, allow infinity. It builds rather quickly. Because you don't have to constantly do any of these things once you let go. The trust thing starts to ripple through the universe. And the trust thing brings more of the trusting things to you. It's a law. Hey, trust equals the thrust of consciousness into the equation of my reality, and that creates new experience, new outcome. And it's so useful as an equation because you don't have to understand it. You don't have to do the math. Let God be the accountant. He's really good at figuring these things out, or she, or it, or them, or omnipresent vacuum energy force. I really don't think there's any God out there that's looking down and saying, hey, what's going on? But I do think that force does look out from every particle, because those particles are all just made up. If they're made up, what are they made up of? God stuff? Could God stuff be the ultimate virtual particle? Yeah, I think maybe so. And then God stuff is formed from what? Consciousness, and so there's probably nothing else? That's right. Okay then. Good. So consciousness is not the same thing as being conscious. That's the mistake that the scientists made. See, they thought to be conscious, then that meant you had to think things into existence by consciously willing them to be. And therefore they thought, well, there's no conscious being thinking things into existence, therefore there's no God. But what if the act of creativity is an unconscious bringing of things into existence. If you will, a reaction diffusion that just continues as a grace. And then whatever you imprint it with is what shows up. So it's pretty much you that's created everything, and if things are a mess, then you got to rearrange things inside your head and then get down into your heart and then go, let's make something differently now. And it doesn't take long. See, one time I read the Bible a lot. I really was an altar boy in Catholic parochial school, and Edgar Cayce read the New Testament one time for every year that he was alive. And so I was reading this when I was 15 or so, and what happened is, because Cayce had really been devotional, this beautiful angel being showed up and said, "What would you have of me, my son?" Well, I read that and the tears just started flowing down my face. I thought, I want that. I want angels that say things like that. And so I read the Bible, the New Testament, one time for every year I was alive, which was 15 times at the time. I just picked it up, read it 15 times in a row. I thought that would probably took care of it. I mean, just if you haven't done it, then just get it done. Get her done. So I did. And by golly, angels showed up. So again, morphic field of something that's already been created. Decide you'll play by those rules, and you like the rules that are suggested by the experiences others had, just decide I'll pop into those rules. That does not mean you actually have to do what they did. The rules are a pattern of information you can step into, and it's done. That's totally different. So when I did this, it created a profound awareness of things in the Bible, but it also brought me into the imaginal realm, as it were, you see? And then that gave me access, I think. Now, it doesn't matter. Lynn McTaggart talks about in her book how the scientists did studies on healers, and they realized it didn't matter if it was Jesus or Spider-Woman or even Spider-Man for that matter. It mattered the belief and then the letting go. Now, what is belief? Belief is an idea that you've held until you don't hold that idea. Like if you haven't encountered angels and you don't believe in angels, it's just because you haven't encountered angels. When I was on the paper route that I talked about earlier in this program, one morning at about 5 in the morning, as I was walking my route, I felt all the hairs of my body stand on end. And they were literally standing up. And I thought, huh. And I turned around, and there were like a V-shaped set of about 12 UFOs going across the moon. You don't have to convince me that UFOs are real. I've seen them. Now, that's good, right? But you don't have to see something that someone else has seen in order to trust that what they saw was trustworthy. And therefore, if you want to have that experience, just have the experience, but don't demand that it be presented in the same way exactly. I mean, you can have the experience like Lynn Buchanan was talking about of feeling Jesus. Whether it's really Jesus or not is immaterial. It is the feeling state that gets you to the potential of the miraculous outcome. And if you cultivate that feeling state, that miraculous outcome can start to look a lot like angels or Jesus or UFOs or whatever you like. It doesn't mean any of it's any more real than your physical body, which isn't. But it does give you reference points. It gives you reference points for changing. It gives you instantaneous points of strongly held new beliefs when you have an experience like that. People think that in order to become psychic, they need to hit a bridge or to be hit in the head, or people have to have a near-death experience to have a relationship with what happens after you die. I don't recommend that. That seems like the morphic field of stupid again. Why not just trust that, hey, there's an experience, and there's an experience, and there's an experience, and you could take those experiences that people have had, get back in your tub. There's an exercise for you to get back in your tub. Take the experiences and take a different little colored bob for each experience that you'd like to have and place them in the tub with you, equidistant, wherever they feel like they should go. Now, as you're feeling this, some of them may not feel like they're quite right. Trust that and reach out with your mind and just move that experience either forward or back or to the sides or spinning around you, whatever feels good. When you get it, you'll begin to feel an expansion. As soon as you drop the pebble of awareness into that pond of potential, it has to bring expansion. There's a collapsing, there's a compression, and then there is an expansion in response. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Okay? So, one of the ways you can actually expand, again, which I don't recommend, is to have these very compressive experiences where you think, oh God, and then God says, yes, and you have this opening. Why not just compress yourself into a point and say, whatever shows up next would just be great, thank you, right? And then let that expansion occur. Then you have shortcut across possibly the need to have these traumatic events in order to learn something. It's like Tommy Lee Jones, as Two-Face, told Jim Carrey as the Riddler after he'd shot Bruce Wayne in the head, don't kill him, he won't learn nothing, right? Don't be so hard-headed that you have to get hit in yours in order to learn that you don't need to learn that way. What I wanted to tell you is after I read the Bible, that one of the things that's in there is that it's harder for, it's like, can a leopard change his spots? You see? And you think this is an indictment. It's like, oh, it's going to be really hard to change because, well, look at my nature, right? And I used to think that. I thought, ooh, sin or habits or whatever. How can a leopard change his spots? Well, my guides just gently and in their humorous manner came in one day and pointed out, hey, you're not a leopard. I went, oh. It doesn't apply then, does it? How useful is that? Oh, boy. So, again, the 2-point is not something you need to know how to do. It's something you inherently do with every waking breath because you always measure one thing against another. In order to determine how far it is to the door, you have to measure how many steps in your stride it would take to get there. And you actually unconsciously know exactly what that'd be like. In order to pull into your driveway safely, before you ever get there, you unconsciously measure exactly how far it is and exactly when to begin turning. So the idea of measuring is an unconscious skill that everybody has, and the idea of 2-pointing simply means that if you're moving from one point A to point B, how do I get there? That's a measurement. And you don't need to know the steps in between in order to achieve the end result. In fact, when you're driving from, say you're coming from the airport, you're going to your house, and you actually unconsciously know exactly what that'd be like. In order to pull into your driveway safely, before you ever get there, you unconsciously measure exactly how far it is and exactly when to begin turning. So the idea of measuring is an unconscious skill that everybody has, and the idea of 2-pointing simply means that if you're moving from one point A to point B, how do I get there? That's a measurement. And you don't need to know the steps in between in order to achieve the end result. In fact, when you're driving from, say you're coming from the airport, you're going to your house in your hometown. If you're driving there, you've done that enough, just like you've breathed enough to remember how to breathe without being told, breathe, unless you're in a special meditative course where you have to remember how to breathe in a certain way. There's a lot of different ways to breathe, and they're all useful as long as you keep doing it. This is the only real breathing exercise that I teach people. Keep doing it. So it's just like that. A 2-point is just like that. It is an unconscious skill you already know how to do, have always known how to do, because it is just your ability to compare one thing to another, and that's how your left brain functions, for goodness sakes. So if you compared somebody's, let's make something up ridiculous, just for fun. Do we have anybody in our studio audience that has a breathing pattern, a breathing thing, asthma, something like that? Yeah, asthma? Yeah, good. All right, come on up here. So as you're listening on this program, you of course can't see what's going on, so I will talk you through it. Now, the first way to begin to interact with anything, say it's a condition, a desire, a pattern, a new direction in life, is to find a way to get into rapport with the informational state that you want to experience. Well, really getting in rapport is just simply a matter of rotating consciousness until you find a point that matches. So if you had 2 soap bubbles floating on the top of some water, and the bubbles start rotating clockwise and counterclockwise until they find a point where they naturally just come together and stick, that would be in rapport. Where the 2 bubbles intersect, now that one bubble reality and the other bubble reality have chosen a new bubble reality called intersection point, and at that point, that's where the 2-point measurement occurs, and that's what collapses your worlds, their worlds, into a state of quantum entanglement, which allows for a new outcome. Okay? So, how long have you had the breathing problem?
Since I was about 4.
Since you're about 4. How old are you now?
60.
Okay, so when I ask how old someone is, it gives me a reference point for moving backwards in time. Now, if you can imagine, your problems, your conditions, your experiences could be like speed bumps. And as you're moving backwards in the SUV, in your vehicle, you hit a speed bump. So each speed bump contains information that's relevant to what you're asking about. So I've got my bubble lined up with his bubble, or you've got your own bubble as you're listening to this lined up with a reality that you've either experienced or something you would like to experience differently. All you do is you look for, well, what if it could be different? And then you look for where the bubbles match up. It's that simple. There's really not that much to it. Now, it's useful to pick a physical, since you're pretending to be physical, it's useful to pick a physical point of reference so that you can then observe the difference between before and after. That's, again, once you collapse the wave function, you want to observe what's different, not what's the same. If you observe the same thing, if you choose the same point of reference, then all you've done is you've learned nothing. You want to learn something even if it doesn't appear to change what you're concerned about. Because if you're trying to change your concerns, that's very difficult because you're focusing on something that already has too much focus on it. Okay? All right, so do you take medications?
No.
And you've got kind of the barrel chest thing. Do you have any COPD component or anything like that?
I'm not sure what that is.
Well, like emphysema, anything like that. And you're not a smoker?
No.
Okay, good man. Okay, so we can ask a question like, where did this begin? Now, that doesn't mean we have to know. It doesn't matter. So we're going to move backwards in time. How do you move backwards in time? You do it. It's like, here's a line. I've crossed the line, and now I'm moving backwards. I crossed the line a long time ago. Okay? So now we're moving backwards. Ooh, how can we tell? What feels like we're moving backwards? And he actually moves backwards. There we go. There you go. Keep in mind, you're not running energy, you're merely watching a pattern move backwards. When you're watching, that gives your conscious mind, again, something to do. You're watching an unconscious process. That means the right and left brain are learning to play nicely together. Isn't that wonderful? Your mother will be so proud of you. Okay, now, let's see. So, we're going to pick something specific. It doesn't have to be related to a problem. So if you were able to see what I'm doing, and you can pretend, I'm touching a man's rib cage, feeling where it's stuck hard or rigid, touching an area on his back with my other hand, and then I'm choosing to measure that tightness, that rigidity, that feeling, and then move backwards to where it isn't. Profound change in yourself as well. Actually enough, because you're in rapport with the pattern, when something that you're focusing on changes, you always change in reference to it. So therefore, this quantum entanglement thing works in your favor. For instance, I know I'm changing because every time my spine pops and moves, and it makes some loud noises sometimes. Yeah, go ahead, that's fine. So this activity of measurement, then that collapsing of the wave function, it takes less than a second. That's not to say that you may not see effects play out again as the pond forms more and more ripples, effects playing out over time. These effects then, once the ripples, say we're talking about our 12-foot enclosure, our tub that we were sitting in the previous exercises, once your ripples reach the edge of the tub, guess what? They bounce back and start to create backwards ripples. And that creates intersection points, and that creates interference patterns of new possibilities. And then, since this process continues forever, basically, that's at least what the scientists say, then those photons can ripple to the ends of the universe and beyond. So this is another reason why matrix energetics is not about a technique for healing, although it can certainly be applied in such ways and has been to great effect. Because if the ripples continue, most definitions of healing is you do something in order for something to occur and you observe it occurring or not. And then once it stops, then you're done with it. Well, with matrix energetics, when you throw the pebble in the pond, the ripples begin, you get out of the way, and it continues on way past when you can track it. And in fact, I tend to believe that when you stop noticing something occurring, you stop noticing the phenomenon, that's when the, quote, real effects kick in. That makes sense, yes? And again, this is a practice thing, but it's an unconscious practice thing. You could practice this in your sleep. You could set your intent to practice in your sleep so that you never bother your conscious mind with all these gory details, so that you just get better. Every time you go to sleep, you wake up and you're better at collapsing the wave function of your reality because you learn to make progressively softer and softer measurements that are less invasive, and you do less over time so that more occurs. A watch pot never boils. I don't know why somebody would want to throw a perfectly good watch in a pot anyway, but let's not watch things occur or not occur, because then you're with Schrodinger's cat experiment of, is it dead or is it alive? Is it a pain or a problem, or is it a cure? As long as you're in that duality, you're subject to refinements in the duality and the confinements of the duality, but you're still in the same box of quantum cracker jacks. Look for the surprise in each box and move on. So that idea of creating a special relativity bubble of consciousness is one I'm particularly fond of. People always worry, well, what if I get their problem? Well, it's okay to get their problem as long as you don't, get their problem. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I get that you're in pain and I feel your pain. Doesn't mean I have to have your pain in order to get your problem. You see? You don't want to be in a relationship with a problem, because guess what? Then you're in a problematic relationship. And it's very different. That's how you can catch a cancer. Healers can catch cancer. I've heard of several examples recently. Why? That's because they're seeing it as cancer. Then they're seeing them as something separate from the cancer and something separate from the person, interacting on the person in order to change the cancer. As soon as you do that, what have you done? You've put yourself, that's right, in a relationship with cancer. Good job. Not such a good idea. So let's throw out the whole relativity thing, and let's just go from the quantum state of, when I look at it, change occurs, and I'm no longer the same, and neither is the thing I've looked at. The act of observing permanently changes aspects of ourselves. Now you say, well, what if it changes for the worse? Well, have a good time with that. You can do that if you really want to prove how powerful you are and you need a strong smack against the head just to realize that doing stupid things is the more field of doing stupid things. But it's not set up that way in the universe. I think I remember something the master Yeshua said. He said, what loving father would hand you a serpent when you ask for a fish or a stone when you ask for bread? You get what I'm saying? Don't go looking for problems because the universe might hand you problems because it thinks that's what you're asking for. Don't go looking for solutions either because the solutions contain within them the problem. Einstein said that in order to transcend a problem or even to understand it, you need to move several levels away in vibration from the problem in order to view it. And then you'll see a solution that truly applies because you're not in the problem. So the easiest way to have the problem and eat it too is to give the problem its due. Kind of like Jesus said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar and to God the things that are God's. Again, if you have a cancer or a disease condition and a doctor that you believe in, or a doctor's morphic field, the morphic field of doctors, if you believe in it, even unconsciously so, it's okay. It's not like you're trying to cleanse the spots off the leopard. It's okay to accept the practices that are held out to you as an offering to cure you. Because that's a big morphic field as well. And if you realize it's a morphic field of cure, then you take the potential of cure without the morphic field of, but I must tell you everything that could go wrong. And then guess what? The odds are a lot better in your favor that the probability is that the possibilities are awesome. A long time ago, there was a series of studies done, Love, Medicine, and Miracles. Bernie Siegel, yes, a surgeon. He talked like a psychiatrist. He was all fluffy. You don't hear surgeons talk with this fluffy love language. Disconcerting, actually. It made me a little sick for a day or so. But it's kind of like seeing Bambi, eat a sheep. You expect that of a T-Rex, But Bambi? No, that's not right. However, that is new information and might be potentially useful if it shows up. But when Bernie Siegel said, what he found out is when the people receiving chemotherapy pictured their chemotherapy and drew it as beneficial, like maybe with this beautiful purple energy around it and the angels administering it, they tended to get well. And when people unconsciously drew what they were afraid of, and they drew skull and crossbones on the injection, and they had a black cloud around them, and then that tended not to be a good prognosis. So I'm a kind of simple about these things. Why don't we just draw beautiful things around ourselves and see what God can add to that? Seems reasonable, doesn't it?
Sounds True presents the Matrix Energetics Experience. Shift your consciousness with the healing energies and hidden frequencies of the universe with author, teacher, and the founder of Matrix Energetics, Richard Bartlett.
Okay, so this is the Sounds True audio of Matrix Energetics. We're calling it the Matrix Energetics Experience. And we have a full live audience here, and they are experienced. That's why they came back. Give yourselves a hand just so that people know we're actually live. Matrix Energetics is a growing phenomenon, and it's a phenomenon in the sense that you can't track it as an explainable experience. When people ask me what Matrix Energetics is, I really don't know what to answer. One of the problems with defining something is as soon as you define it, you confine it to your expectations and what you believe is possible. Now, for a lot of us, particularly if we have disease conditions, financial problems, we have lives that are not working, relationships that suck, etc. Well, depending upon if we have a Catholic, Jewish, or New Age upbringing, we assume it's our fault and it's our karma. That's part of those virtual particles that I like to talk about, the muon, the gluon, the shame on you on, right? It somehow must be my fault, you know? It's like, what have I done wrong, God? And punish me more because I love it. Yeah, you've got a little problem if you like the whip, you know, like in the Da Vinci Code. If you like hitting yourself with a whip, you know, somehow that's just not good. Most of us, we whip ourselves into a frenzy over what we can't do, right? What's wrong with our lives? We whip ourselves in a frenzy and say, surely it must be something we've done wrong, right? Or maybe we blame another person, or maybe we blame the environment, or the president, God forbid. I mean, honestly, I can't see blaming the president for our problems. Our problems have been going on for at least, if you track it, 40 years, and then whoever comes in inherits a legacy, and then they get the blame. Oh yeah, that works real well. That's like, well, it's too much like marriage and a lot of other things, you know, in life. Or if you happen to be the ADD kid in the class before they give you the medications, right? I was ADD before ADD was cool, you know, see? Now, for me, ADD just turned out to be that I got 2 medical degrees because I couldn't focus. When I got the first one, I thought I must have not been paying attention because I was missing something somewhere. So I went back, got in the second one. And then as I was sitting through the second one, I went, this was a dumb idea. You know? It's like, I remember all of this. Right? Well, how many of us have done things like that? We thought, well, there's something we're just not getting. We somehow have missed some basic piece of information. If only we could go back and understand that one thing, then everything would be okay, right? Everything would work if we just had not done that one thing or understood that one thing, right? Well, that one thing is kind of like Jack Palance, right? In City Slickers, too. You know, it's just that one thing, you know? But it's up for each one of you to decide what that one thing is. That's why I love matrix energetics. I don't love it because I invented it. It invented me, you see. I mean, the person you see up here is not the person I was when I started out with it. I was, well, not much more serious and pretty much still the same child. I don't have an inner child to wear on my outer sleeve. I just have an outer child. My inner child says, why bother? You're doing all the work, right? If you can have fun, then if you ask the questions, like that one question that you maybe missed somewhere, if you ask the question from a point of having fun, of levity, of joy in your heart, then you have some possibility that you'll get an answer. Here's the problem. If we always ask a question like, why do I suck? Or why does life treat me this way? Or why does God hate me? Guess what? You get really good answers for the questions you're asking. You'll get more experiences that'll show you that God hates you, or life sucks, or you should never trust a man, or relationships are just not a good idea for you, right? I mean, you know this, right? Here's the problem. Guess what asks the questions? That's the left brain, and the left brain is an idiot. It doesn't know anything. It's like asking a 36,000-year-old garbage collector to explain the meaning of life. Well, you see, it's all within the heart of the rotten tomato, my son. You see, if you can only understand the garbage, you see, and you sift through it, you will find the jewel of perfect wisdom hidden within, you know, your heart. Well, that could work, actually, couldn't it? I mean, if you make it up, it'll show up. That's the thing. So you want to make up a mythology, or you want to find a mythology that's already made up that allows you to do the things that you want to be able to do that you can't do. Now, excuse me, not everyone can win a lottery, can they? Did you guys see the movie with Jim Carrey where he got to play God for a little while, right? Bruce Almighty. Well, here's the problem. He just said yes to everybody, right? He just said yes to everything because there was this big buzz in his head. And I don't think that was the Om, right? I don't think that was the cosmic sound. I think that the cosmic sound doesn't sound like a whole bunch of people whining about what they can't have. In fact, I don't think you can understand the cosmic sound at all, right? If you're meant to understand it, then it's your left brain interpreting it. That's the problem with matrix energetics. If you really understand what it's about, then you certainly do not understand it. That's the same thing that Feynman said. Feynman said this. Richard Feynman, heard of him, the physicist? Richard Feynman said that at one point in life, there were maybe 12 men in the world that could be gotten together and put in a room that could discuss the theory of relativity, right? And then he went on to say, I'm pretty sure no one understands quantum physics. If you think you've understood, you have not understood. Because the act of understanding with the conscious mind collapses the wave function of what you're seeing into what you expect to have. It becomes your observed outcome. So therefore, it is true for you in the moment, but it's no more true than anything else. It is just a perceptual bias that you have basically institutionalized as your reality. Now, it's useful to be institutionalized for your reality. There's institutions of higher learning, and there's institutionalizing, which actually gets you to a point of higher learning. Like, really shouldn't have said that to the psychiatrist, right? When I was in Bastyr University, we had a gentleman come into the university who was seeing a big blue elephant with multi-arms. And thank God, and I do mean this literally, thank God that they got me for the doctor. Right? Because I understood that it was probably Ganesha that he was seeing. So he was in the morphic field of Hinduism, you see? Whereas somebody else would have got him, I'm sorry, he would have been carted away. You hear what I'm saying? One man's delusion is another man's enlightenment. And God said that in the Bible, if you can trust what God said in the Bible, because I'm not so sure the Bible has anything to say about God. But if it did, because it's been manipulated a whole lot, and people don't realize that when they read these books, they don't realize that there's an intent and a purpose for writing the book, and that intent and purpose may not have much to do with the way it was originally presented. And so you lose things in the interpretation, in language, in trying to define meaning. You lose the interpretation of the heart. You lose the possibility of the outcome for yourself. If you take everything to just be very rigidly defined without the flexibility of maybe being right, maybe being wrong, having a lot of gray areas, then what you get is you always get the same dependable outcomes. But what if your dependable outcomes are not so useful? Then you have a problem. Now, if you think about that, what the scientists have realized is that the act of observation causes something called quantum entanglement, and you become the observer, and the observed outcome becomes entangled, so you can't tell what the original condition is, because once you observe it, that's what you've got. And that's how your lives are, isn't it? I mean, how many of you have changed your lives by trying to just reason out how your life should change and then do it? Yeah, that's right. Just so you know, there's 3 people that raised their hand out of 140 or so. So we're pretty sure that changing your life is not a conscious decision. That's based upon trust, believing in a higher power, accepting a new outcome when it shows up, and being open to change. These are simple things. These things define where the little speed bumps in possibility are on the road of life, you see? Sometimes you hit a speed bump, don't you? And you go, wow, what was that? Like I hit a bridge. In the book, you guys have read this. In my first book, I talk about hitting a bridge at 65 miles an hour. I was going 85, but when I hit the black ice on the bridge, it slowed me down to 65 because I did try and swerve and brake like you're supposed to do, which lined me up perfectly, by the way, to hit the bridge. Nice perceptual bias. Never, by the way, never look where you don't want to go. This is a principle they teach you in racing. Tony Robbins talks about that in one of his tapes that I heard. He says that he tried racing on, one of these closed courses, and as soon as he looked at the bales, where you're not supposed to go, he wound up in one. I did the same exact thing on the motorcycle safety course, and believe me, it's a lot safer if someone that's never been on a motorcycle takes a course to learn what one looks like before you get on the road with one. I was weaving between cones, right? These big orange cones. Well, you're supposed to do it without hitting the cones, but here's the problem. If you look down while you're weaving through the cones, you wind up on the ground with the cones on top of you. Actually, I wound up on the ground with the motorbike on top of me. And this is not a pleasant experience. And this is what we do. We try and avoid the speed bumps in our lives. We try and avoid the ice on the bridge. We try and avoid the things that are helping us to change that may look traumatic at the time because we think, oh, that's scary. What's that? It's the unanswered question that I worry about, because what is it I'm not asking that the universe is answering in the next moment? Now, that's also a useful thing, too, if you believe in grace. Here's where it splits. This is where the dividing line between observer and observed happens, is at the point of the wave function, right at the point of the speed of light, where all possibility is in play. There's a boundary between that. Einstein said you can't go faster than the speed of light. Well, what he meant was you can't be observed to go faster than the speed of light because the tool you're using to observe is light. Yeah, no one ever thinks about that part. Wait a minute, I can't go faster than the speed of light because the tool that I'm observing with is light. Okay then, that makes sense, right? That doesn't mean you can't go faster than the speed of light with your thoughts or even faster than the speed of light with your body. You just can't be observed to be doing it. Because what we use for our visual apparatus, all of our sensory, is electromagnetic spectrum, and that's only, it's 0.1% what we're able to perceive. You think we might be missing a few things? Like, I don't know, maybe there's a high frequency here, there's an angel, and over here there's something that's here, and down here, it's a brand new car, You want to just be able to differentiate between and brand new car. Well, how do you do that? Well, the devil's in the details, isn't it? So the way we set up our life is basically the way we've been trained to use our perceptual bias. You understand this? Now, you don't realize you have a perceptual bias until you smack into something that challenges it. This is why it's okay. This is why it's useful to hit the speed bumps in the road. This is why it's useful when God, or whatever you believe, throws up an obstacle that you have to either vibrate through, get around, go under, go above, or just stop and look at. Some of you, how many of you think it might be useful before you hit the obstacle to stop and look at the obstacle as it's approaching? And you go, yeah, that doesn't look like it's going to work out so well. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Do you know that you can actually move forward in time with your mind? Fred Alan Wolf talks about that. Hey, why do you suppose part of our brain is called the temporal lobe, and temporal relates to time? I think there might be some sort of synchrony there, There's a way for us to time travel, and if we can time travel forward and see what's ahead, we actually can choose. The only time we can't choose is when we don't know that we have a choice. Do you understand that? And most of us really do not realize that we don't have a choice because we believe still in the Newtonian delusion about the universe. Do you know what the Newtonian delusion is? We believe we're separate. As long as we're separate, then things act on us and we act against them. You understand that? And so this is how we do everything. We have to study or work really hard to get ahead, or take a second job, work day and night. Oh yeah, that works, believe me. 2 medical degrees, yeah, I got ahead. No, I had to get hit in the head, But as long as we hold to that model, that will be our outcome. Now here's the problem with that. It's not only our model. It's not just our model that we're holding to. We're also holding to everyone else's model that matches our distinctions. This is where the huge problems come into play. Because if we have to match our distinctions, even unconsciously, and that's how we do it, then everybody that has a particular model of like, well, relationships are bad because you can't trust blah, because blah happens. Just insert your own experience there. Then what do you suppose you've got? Well, you've got the reinforcement of everybody that's ever believed that and had that experience. It's called a morphic field. Do you know what a morphic field is? It's something Rupert Sheldrake made up. And when I say made up, I say that with, by the way, the greatest of respect and reverence. Because when you make something up, you're doing search instead of research. You know what research is? Research is looking over the same old stuff over and over again and designing experiments to prove what you already think you know. It is a great way to get grants and waste taxpayers' money, but there are very few people that are actually doing search, having new ideas. New ideas almost always, because of the nature of the beast of the morphic field of status quo, says don't allow this to change. Because we don't want to feel threatened by new information, because new information could possibly harm us in some way, right? Or perhaps the drug companies wouldn't make as much money, or the oil companies, or the powers that be that appear to be on the scene of life until they vanish like so many puffs of smoke. 2012, you know, is coming. I don't know that everything's going to vanish like a puff of smoke. It might be 2 puffs, but we do want to prepare. We want to prepare. And how do you prepare for something that you don't know? You don't know about it. Well, you don't prepare by being fearful, do you? If you prepare by being fearful, what are you going to get? You're going to have experiences that ratify what you fear could happen. And how many people are being taught to fear 2012, or to fear Armageddon, or to fear this or fear that? How much are we ratifying, putting actual pressure on the structure of the earth itself with our fears of what will come upon the earth? Because the Bible said so, or because the scientists say the greenhouse effect, or whatever, right? These things are opinions. They're opinions. There are no facts. Facts are perceptual biases. Facts are things that are made up. In fact, fact is derived from the Latin word factum, and factum means something which is made up. So, if we're going to make up facts, then we want to decide that useful facts should be the order of the day, rather than facts that A, serve no purpose, and do not lift the weight of the burdens on mankind, or even on ourselves, right? We want facts that we're willing to lie about, right? We'll lie about the facts. It's like, well, you suck. You always suck. You know, it's like, you'll probably suck in the future. And you go, well, where is that voice? Well, you suck. You'll never find me. He says, no, I'm going to send Arnold Schwarzenegger to find you, you know. You'll create a big mythology like the Terminator. I'm back and I will find you, you know. You want to set it up so that you have a little help, is what I'm telling you, right? I mean, how many of you think that if you go to a reality that's bigger than you are, you can perhaps achieve larger than life results? Does that make sense? So how do you do that? You do what Einstein did. You do what these great thinkers did. You hallucinate out of your freaking skulls. It works for me.